Don't come to the company party. It's only for successful key partners. Jack Miller stared at the message his wife had sent to his phone, feeling the blood freeze in his veins. It wasn't just a rejection. It was a blatant dismissal, an open betrayal of their 15-year marriage. Outside the union office window, the icy Pittsburgh wind beat against the glass, just like the storm raging in his heart. His fingers trembled slightly as he touched the screen, but his gaze was unusually calm. 15 years of marriage were collapsing in this single moment. 15 years of trust vanished into thin air. He remembered bits of a phone call he'd accidentally overheard yesterday. The unusually intimate photos of Eleanor with Ethan Sterling, the executive from New Era Manufacturing, the rumors swirling within the union. A conspiracy of betrayal was brewing. All the clues were confirmed in this one text. Jack took a deep breath and typed 2 words on the screen. Got it. Then, he slowly put down the phone and turned on his computer. As the president of the largest steelworkers union in Pittsburgh, he knew the steelworkers credit union system inside and out. With 3 clicks, he found the loan documents for his wife's company, that $15 million revolving loan guaranteed by his personal credibility. Without hesitation, he clicked the Revoke Guarantee button. The system displayed a warning. This action will cause the immediate call of the loan and could have severe consequences. Confirm. Jack pictured Eleanor's coldness and distance over the past few months. He remembered seeing her chatting intimately with Ethan in upscale restaurants, her obvious disdain for union activities. He clicked Confirm. The computer screen flashed with a Transaction Complete notification, casting a cold blue light on his face. Jack grabbed his jacket and stood by the window. Down below, several steelworkers were talking, their smiles and body language showing the trust they had in him. These people were his brothers, the family he had fought for his entire life. And his real family, his wife, was conspiring to betray him and these very brothers. Jack picked up the union pin from his desk and clenched it in his hand. He knew that in the next 24 hours, a storm would break loose. His marriage, Eleanor's company, even the future of the union, everything would be reshuffled in this storm. But right now, his heart was strangely calm. It wasn't indifference, but a cold resolve after being pushed to the edge. He knew what he had to do, and he knew the price of betrayal. He dialed Raymond's number, the head of risk management at the credit union. Raymond, it's Jack. I need you to execute an urgent operation immediately. The revenge had begun. Jack first met Eleanor 15 years ago, on an autumn evening. That day, he had just led the union to a victory in a crucial labor negotiation, securing unprecedented benefits for the workers. At the celebration, everyone was toasting the new union vice president. You know, you've shattered a long-standing myth, a clear female voice said from the side. Jack turned to see a woman in a dark blue business suit, with a confident, bright smile. What myth? He asked, curious. That union leaders are just brutes who only know how to talk with their fists. She looked him straight in the eye. You use wisdom and strategy. I'm impressed. She was Eleanor Vance, a management consultant invited to the celebration. She was different from the women Jack usually met. She had a sharp business mind, but also understood the value and dignity of blue-collar workers. My father was a machinist in Michigan, she said during their conversation that night. He taught me that real business success is built on respecting every link in the chain and every person. Jack was captivated by her ideas and enthusiasm. They talked at the bar until dawn, from labor relations to literature, from the future of the steel industry to childhood memories. Their marriage was sealed a year later. Back then, the Pittsburgh media called them the perfect union of steel and silk, the strength of the steel workers and the wisdom of an intellectual woman. At the wedding, the Union brothers and the business elite sat together, witnessing the union of this seemingly mismatched but perfectly complementary couple. Jack supported Eleanor in starting her own consulting firm, specializing in labor relations advice. Her first major client was a manufacturing company facing a workers' strike introduced by Jack himself. You can see things other consultants can't, Jack told her. You understand both the workers and the companies. You can build real bridges between them. Eleanor's company grew rapidly in its early years. Jack was proud of her success, while Eleanor incorporated her husband's insights and experience into her consulting model. They supported each other, fulfilled each other, becoming each other's strongest pillar. When Jack attended union events, Eleanor was always by his side, chatting warmly with the workers. Likewise, when Eleanor attended business dinners, Jack would put on an ill-fitting suit and try his best to blend into that world, which was somewhat foreign to him. "We are translators for each other," is how Eleanor described their relationship. "You taught me what true solidarity is, and I help you have a voice in the world of the elite." They bought a small house on the banks of the Monongahela River, and on weekends they would have barbecues in the backyard, inviting friends from the union and Eleanor's business partners to join them. That time was the happiest period of Jack's life. They believed their union was not just a romance between two people, but also the communication and understanding between two worlds. Back then, Jack couldn't have imagined that this idealistic union would eventually crumble in the whirlwind of reality. The change was so subtle that Jack, looking back later, realized the signs had been there all along. The turning point came the day Eleanor appeared on the cover of Forbes magazine. The magazine had named her one of the 25 outstanding women changing labor relations. Jack clearly remembered that day he left work early, bought champagne and her favorite blueberry cheesecake, planning to surprise her. When he opened the door, he heard Eleanor on the phone. "Ethan, thank you for the congratulations. Yes, I'm thrilled." "Oh, Jack? He's probably at a meeting with the workers at the union hall. Honestly, he probably doesn't even know this issue of Forbes is out." Eleanor's laugh had an edge of arrogance Jack had never heard before. He quietly closed the door, left the surprise on the hall table, and left in silence. That night, when he returned home, he said nothing. When Eleanor excitedly showed him the magazine, he pretended to see it for the first time and congratulated her on her achievement. But that name, Ethan, began to echo in his mind. From then on, the subtle changes began to accumulate. The social events Eleanor attended became more and more exclusive, and Jack was invited less and less frequently. "You'd be bored at those things," Eleanor would explain. "It's all executives talking about stocks and investments." Jack didn't insist. He chose to believe this was just a necessary part of Eleanor's career development. To support her expansion plans, he voluntarily offered to help. "I can get the union's credit union to back you," he proposed during dinner one night. "The interest rate will be lower than commercial banks. It's the union's trust in you." Eleanor gladly accepted, and they secured a $15 million revolving line of credit. Jack personally guaranteed the loan, backing it with his personal credibility. "This is our joint venture," he said at the time. "Your success is my success." Eleanor hugged him excitedly, but Jack didn't notice the flicker of calculation that passed through her eyes. Gradually, their conversations began to drift apart. When Jack talked about union matters, Eleanor always seemed distracted. When Eleanor talked about new clients and projects, she used terms that made Jack feel more and more like an outsider. Once, Jack was waiting for Eleanor at her office to have lunch together, and he unintentionally overheard her conversation with her assistant. "Thomas says he can't understand why we're taking on this steel mill project. The profits are too low," the assistant said. "Tell Thomas it's to do my husband a favor." Eleanor's voice sounded somewhat impatient. "Sometimes we have to do charity work to maintain relationships." In that moment, Jack felt a sharp pang of pain. He didn't show it, but lunch that day was especially quiet. When they got home that night, Eleanor asked, "What's wrong with you today? You're so quiet." Jack just said, "I'm a little tired. A lot going on at the union." He chose silence, not out of cowardice, but because he hoped to give this marriage a chance, to give Eleanor space to change. But he didn't know that a bigger storm was about to hit. Jack first heard the name Ethan Sterling during one of Eleanor's phone calls. Later, he saw the man's picture in Business Week, the chief operating officer of New Era Manufacturing, an elite educated executive hailed as the transformer of the American manufacturing industry. The irony of fate was that this very company was about to face Jack and his union at the labor negotiation table. Ethan Sterling wanted to completely restructure the company's production lines, drastically reducing labor costs, which meant layoffs and benefit cuts for the workers. The union led by Jack became the biggest obstacle to his plan. In the frequent contact between Eleanor and Ethan, she gradually found herself drawn to his business ideas and personal charisma. Ethan not only gave her access to exclusive social circles, but more importantly, he showed her a whole new worldview, one where traditional unions hindered progress and elite managers were the true driving force of social advancement. "Think about it, Eleanor," Ethan said during a private dinner. "If we could break free from these outdated union restrictions, we could create a more efficient, modern manufacturing industry. And you, with your unique perspective, understanding both worlds, could be a key figure in this transformation." Eleanor was moved by this vision and the recognition of her abilities. Every conversation with Ethan made her feel truly understood and validated, not just as the union president's wife. On one chance occasion, Jack ran into Eleanor and Ethan downtown. They were coming out of a fancy restaurant. Eleanor was wearing an expensive evening gown that Jack had never seen, and Ethan was holding her arm familiarly. They were chatting and laughing, completely unaware of Jack's presence across the street. In that moment, Jack felt an unprecedented sense of strangeness. That woman, in her dazzling dress and elegant manners, seemed so compatible with that suited executive, as if they belonged to the same world, a world Jack had never set foot in. He didn't approach them, just watched silently as they got into a luxury car and drove away. When he got home, Eleanor arrived late. She explained that she had an important client meeting. Jack said nothing, just nodded. From that night on, he started noticing more details. Eleanor's frequent password changes on her phone, her stepping out onto the balcony for private calls late at night, more and more overtime and business trips. At the same time, rumors also started circulating within the union. New Era Manufacturing seemed to be contacting certain union members, trying to divide their internal solidarity. "Watch out for Matthew," Thomas, an old friend of Jack's, warned him during a private conversation. "He's been getting pretty close to the company guys lately. Someone saw him meeting with a suit at a hotel." Matthew was the union's vice president and had always been somewhat dissatisfied with Jack's leadership style. He believed Jack was too moderate and should take a tougher stance in negotiations. Jack began to piece these things together. He consulted with a union-funded legal advisor on how to legally obtain evidence of potential misconduct. After getting confirmation, he asked a friend, Samuel, a retired cybersecurity expert, for help in investigating the public business records of Eleanor's company and potential conflicts of interest. The results of the investigation confirmed his worst suspicions. Eleanor's company had signed a secret consulting contract with New Era Manufacturing, and the specific content of the contract included labor relations restructuring and human resources optimization. These cold business terms, in reality, meant how to bypass the union, how to legally reduce workers' benefits. What broke Jack's heart the most was that Samuel, by analyzing publicly available social media information and business activity records, discovered that the interaction between Eleanor and Ethan had already gone beyond the professional realm. There were records of private dinners, photos of them attending the same charity event, and someone had even anonymously reported to the union that they had been seen spending a weekend together at a resort hotel outside the city. "Jack, I'm sorry to bring you this news," Samuel said as he handed over the investigation results. "But you need to know the truth. They're not just betraying you personally, but the entire union." Jack held those documents, feeling an unprecedented chill. This wasn't just a marital betrayal, but a negation of his lifelong beliefs. Eleanor had not only betrayed his trust as a husband, but also his dignity and mission as a union leader. But Jack didn't reveal everything right away. As an experienced negotiator, he knew the importance of timing. He began to prepare in secret, gathering more evidence, waiting for the most opportune moment. He knew the best revenge isn't an emotional outburst, but a carefully planned collapse. While Jack was secretly investigating, the relationship between Eleanor and Ethan deepened. From work partners to lovers, from secret rendezvous to bold plans, their ambition and desires intertwined, weaving a complex web. It was a rainy night. Only Eleanor and Ethan were left in her office. Outside, the neon lights of Pittsburgh blurred into colorful halos in the rain. "The negotiation with the union is next Tuesday," Ethan said, standing by the window with his back to Eleanor. Your husband has already mobilized all his resources, preparing to fight us to the end. He's always been like that, Eleanor said quietly. Jack believes he's protecting the workers' rights. Ethan turned around, a sharp glint in his eyes. But we both know he's actually hindering progress. Those workers need to learn new skills, adapt to the new era, not rely on the protection of outdated unions. Eleanor was silent for a moment, then asked, "What's your plan?" "I've already contacted someone inside the union, Matthew. He's the vice president, but he's always had objections to Jack's leadership style. He thinks Jack is too soft, that he hasn't fully utilized the union's power." "Matthew?" Eleanor was surprised. "I didn't know he had issues with Jack." "Because he's smart, he knows how to hide his thoughts." Ethan walked towards Eleanor. "He's agreed to initiate a no-confidence vote within the union before next week's negotiation. If it succeeds, Jack will lose his position as union president, and our negotiation will be much easier." Eleanor felt uneasy. This sounds like a coup. "It's business, Eleanor." Ethan took her hand. "Sometimes, to move forward, you have to make tough decisions. Think about it. If everything goes smoothly, I'll become CEO, and you'll be my chief strategy officer. Together, we can build a completely new model for the manufacturing industry." Eleanor looked into Ethan's ambitious eyes, thinking of that bright future. A future without worker strikes, without vulgar union scenes. A world she truly belonged to. "What do you need me to do?" she finally asked. "Very simple," Ethan smiled. "Make sure Jack doesn't show up at the negotiation on Tuesday night. That day, your company will be holding a major party, and Jack can't attend. That way, when Matthew launches his challenge, Jack won't be there to control the situation." Eleanor nodded, suppressing her last bit of doubt. She had made her choice. She chose Ethan, chose that elite world she believed she was meant to be in. Upon returning home, Eleanor looked at the sleeping Jack with mixed feelings. Once, this man was her hero, the rock in her heart. But now, in her eyes, he had become an obstacle, an anchor dragging her into the past. "I'm sorry, Jack," she thought to herself, "but I have to think about my own future." What she didn't know was that Jack wasn't really asleep. He felt her gaze, heard her faint sigh, but he chose to keep his eyes closed, giving himself and her the last illusion of dignity. The next morning, Jack left home earlier than usual. He needed to prepare his final counterattack. "Thomas," he summoned several of his most trusted friends to the union office, "I need your help. Tomorrow's negotiation will be a battle that determines our future." He didn't mention Eleanor's betrayal, only detailing the evidence he had on Matthew's collusion with the company. "How do we deal with this traitor?" Thomas asked furiously. "Let's not alert anyone," Jack said calmly. "Let him think his plan is on track. Tomorrow, I expect everyone to be on time and stay alert. When I give the signal, you'll know what to do." Meanwhile, Eleanor began preparing for the party. That party destined to fail, that party that would be the starting point of her new life. In this silent war, both sides were preparing for the final battle. Only one side was unaware that it had already been exposed. Jack was not one to wait passively. As a seasoned union leader, he knew the importance of intelligence and preparation. After discovering the conspiracy between Eleanor and Ethan, he began to discreetly organize within the union. He invited several trusted old colleagues to dinner, subtly mentioning Matthew's unusual behavior recently. "I've noticed Matthew has been very close to the people from New Era Manufacturing lately," Jack said over his beer mug. "Someone saw them meeting at the Grandview Hotel." "That guy has always coveted your position," his old friend Thomas mumbled. "But the workers trust you, Jack, not him." Jack gave a slight smile. "I'm not worried about my position, Thomas. I'm worried about the unity of the union. Division only benefits the company." "What do you need us to do?" another friend, Ben, asked. "Stay alert. Keep your eyes and ears open. If Matthew really plans to make a move before next week's negotiation, I need to know in advance." At the same time, Jack began to secretly monitor Matthew's activities. He arranged for several trusted union members to follow Matthew in shifts, recording his unusual behavior. They soon discovered that Matthew was frequently meeting secretly with representatives from New Era Manufacturing and even received suspicious packages of money. "This is bribery, blatant bribery," Thomas said furiously. "This guy dares to sell out his own brothers." Jack calmly collected this evidence. He knew that in the final showdown, these would be powerful weapons for his counterattack. On the other hand, he also began preparing for potential financial impacts. He consulted with the union's legal advisor to understand the possible legal consequences if he revoked the guarantee on Eleanor's company loan. "Legally, you have the right to revoke a personal guarantee at any time," the lawyer explained, "especially if you discover the loan might be used for improper purposes. But this will immediately trigger the loan's maturity clause, which could cause a serious financial crisis." Jack nodded. "I understand the risk, but sometimes you have to make tough decisions." Meanwhile, Eleanor also noticed some abnormalities. Jack started coming home late frequently, and when she asked, he would only say he had union business to attend to. He spent less and less time at home, and even when he was there, he was often silent, lost in his own thoughts. Jack's silence wasn't born of weakness, but of his internal struggle and preparation. He had once loved Eleanor deeply, been proud of her dreams, supported her every step. Now, discovering that she had not only betrayed their marriage but also the cause he had fought for his entire life, this double blow required time to digest and plan. One night, Eleanor tentatively asked, "Jack, about the negotiation next Tuesday, do you have a plan?" Jack looked up and watched her calmly. "The plan has always been the same, Eleanor. Protect the workers' rights, ensure the company can't arbitrarily cut benefits. But New Era Manufacturing holds a very firm position," Eleanor continued. "They have the full support of the board." "Really?" Jack's gaze became piercing. "How do you know this inside information?" Eleanor realized she had said too much and quickly explained, "I heard it in business circles. This kind of news always spreads quickly." Jack didn't press further, simply saying, "I believe the side of justice will prevail in the end." Eleanor felt uneasy. Jack's tone was unnaturally calm, like the calm before a storm. But she soon convinced herself she was just being paranoid. Jack couldn't possibly know her plan with Ethan. The next day, Matthew found Jack and proposed calling a meeting of core union members before the negotiation. "We need to discuss some strategic issues," Matthew said. "Some members feel our position should be firmer." Jack agreed with a smile. "Good idea, Matthew. Coincidentally, I also have some important matters to share with everyone." After Matthew left, Jack called Samuel. "Is everything ready?" "All the evidence has been organized," Samuel confirmed, "including photos of Matthew accepting bribes, the secret contract between Eleanor's company and New Era Manufacturing, and their joint plan to divide the union. All are legally obtained evidence, usable on any occasion." Jack closed his eyes, feeling a mix of pain and determination. "Send me all the materials. It's time to end all this." That night, Jack didn't go home. He worked all night in the union office preparing for the decisive battle the next day. He knew this wasn't just a personal revenge, but a fight that would affect the fate of thousands of workers. He watched the Pittsburgh skyline through the window, this city that had witnessed his struggles, his love, and would now witness his revenge. At that moment, his phone vibrated. It was a text from Eleanor. "Don't come to the company party. It's only for successful key partners." This message was the last straw for Jack. He knew it wasn't a simple exclusion, but a carefully planned trap meant to prevent him from appearing at the union negotiation at a crucial moment. Jack replied with 2 words, "Got it." Then, he logged into the Steelworkers Credit Union system and formally revoked all guarantees for Eleanor's company. The revenge had officially begun. Eleanor's party was held in one of Pittsburgh's most expensive hotels. Under huge crystal chandeliers, the business elite held champagne glasses, chatting lively. Eleanor, dressed in an expensive gown, stood beside Ethan, introducing her company's new projects to the guests. "This is an opportunity to change the landscape of the manufacturing industry," she said confidently. "We will help companies achieve a true modern transformation." Ethan added by her side, "Eleanor's company has a unique perspective, able to understand the needs of both management and the grassroots. This balance is very valuable." The guests nodded in approval. At that moment, Eleanor felt completely fulfilled. This was precisely the recognition she longed for, the acceptance of high society. In this brilliant world, she was no longer just the union president's wife, but a valuable business partner, a successful and independent woman. Just as she was preparing to continue her speech, her assistant Sylvia rushed over, her face pale, whispering in her ear, "Eleanor, something serious has happened. Our bank accounts have been frozen. We can't make any payments." Eleanor felt dizzy. "What? How's that possible?" "Not only that," Sylvia lowered her voice. "We just received a notice that the Steelworkers Credit Union is demanding we immediately repay the entire loan, or they will take legal action. They cited the misuse of funds clause in the contract." Eleanor's first reaction was to look at Ethan, but he was engrossed in a conversation with several investors, completely unaware of the crisis that had just erupted. "Don't alarm the others yet," Eleanor said, feigning calm. "Give me half an hour. I'll solve this problem." She went to a quiet corner and called Jack. No answer. She tried again. Still no answer. A bad feeling washed over her. "Jack, it's me," she said to his voicemail. "A problem has come up. I need to talk to you. Please call me back." 10 minutes later, the situation began to spiral out of control. The catering providers, not receiving their final payment, started packing up their equipment. The music stopped. The waiters began clearing the tables. The guests looked at each other in confusion, whispering among themselves. Ethan finally noticed the anomaly and walked over to Eleanor. "What happened?" "The accounts have been frozen," Eleanor said with difficulty. "The credit union is demanding immediate repayment." Ethan's face changed. "What? Today? Right at the critical moment of our plan?" "It must be Jack," Eleanor said through gritted teeth. "He must have found out something." Ethan's expression went from shock to coldness. "You said he wouldn't find out. You said you could control the situation." "I can solve this problem," Eleanor panicked. "I just need—" "No," Ethan interrupted her. "We can't risk it. I need to contact Matthew immediately. Change the plan." He quickly walked away, leaving Eleanor alone in the gradually emptying banquet hall. The party had completely failed. The image she had carefully built was crumbling before everyone's eyes. With the collapse of the party, Eleanor's world also began to fall apart. Guests made excuses to leave. Those elite businessmen who had treated her with respect now looked at her with doubt and mockery. No one wanted to be associated with a person in financial crisis. Worse yet, her phone kept buzzing with emergency notifications. Employees found they couldn't withdraw money. Suppliers angrily demanded payment. The accountant sent a series of warning messages predicting serious legal consequences for the company. Eleanor began frantically calling Jack over and over again. Her attitude changed from initial angry questioning, "What is the meaning of this?" "Unfreeze the accounts immediately," to later, "Please, Jack, please answer the phone. We need to talk." But Jack never answered. Ethan, after trying to contact Matthew, returned to Eleanor's side with an even grimmer expression. "Matthew isn't answering my calls. I have a bad feeling." "We have to stop tomorrow's negotiation," Eleanor said desperately. "If Jack has discovered our plan—" "It's too late," Ethan said coldly. "I have to go back to the company to reassess the situation. As for your financial problem, I'm sorry, but that's something you have to solve yourself." Eleanor couldn't believe her ears. "Ethan, we're partners. We have joint plans." "Business is business, Eleanor." Ethan's gaze turned indifferent. "When risk appears, the wise thing to do is to cut your losses." He left without looking back, leaving Eleanor alone in the ruined party venue, facing a double catastrophe in her professional career and personal life. When the night was deep and Eleanor returned home alone, she found that Jack was not there. The house was silent. Only the echo of her footsteps resonated in the empty halls. She sat in the dark, her phone lighting up and going dark, showing the record of the 68 unanswered calls she had made that night. At that moment, she finally realized she had not only lost a party, but probably also her career, her reputation, and her husband. And on the other side of the city, Jack was sitting in his favorite bar, alone with a glass of whiskey in front of him. He wasn't drunk, nor was he emotionally agitated. He was just sitting quietly, preparing for tomorrow's decisive battle. "Tomorrow," he said to himself, "it will all be over." The next morning, after a sleepless night, Eleanor finally received a message from Jack. It wasn't a phone call, but a short text message. "See you at the negotiation room." She immediately understood what Jack meant, the 10 a.m. negotiation between New Era Manufacturing and the union. Eleanor hastily got ready, put on her most professional suit, and drove to the negotiation venue. On the way, she repeatedly called Ethan, but no one answered. A bad feeling enveloped her. When she arrived at the meeting building, the negotiation had already begun. The union members in the hallway looked at her with coldness and hostility when they saw her. She rushed to the meeting room. As she opened the door, all eyes turned to her. At the head of the conference table, Jack occupied the main seat, looking gaunt but with a piercing gaze. Ethan was sitting opposite him with a serious expression. Matthew, the vice president who was supposed to have initiated the coup, was sitting to Jack's right, his head bowed, not daring to look at anyone. The atmosphere in the room was terribly tense. "Ah, Eleanor," Jack said calmly, "you're just in time. Before we negotiate the new contract, I want everyone to see clearly who we are really negotiating with." He motioned for his assistant to distribute a document. When the document reached Eleanor's hands, she felt the room spin. The document clearly showed a diagram of the flow of funds from her company's accounts, with 2 large transfers pointing directly to Matthew's overseas account. There were also email records between her and Ethan, discussing in detail how to create internal turmoil and overthrow Jack. The last page was a screenshot of the message she had sent Jack yesterday. "Don't come to the company party. It's only for successful key partners." Eleanor shot up, her face pale. "This is slander," she shouted. "It's you. You're a control freak. You can't stand to see me more successful than you, so you use these despicable means to frame me." She tried to portray herself as a victim, an independent woman suppressed by a jealous husband. But her voice was trembling, her gaze evasive. No one believed her. A silence fell over the room. The union members watched her with cold stares, while the representatives from New Era Manufacturing showed expressions of astonishment. Eleanor turned to Matthew, hoping he would say something, but Matthew just sat there silently, his face pale. She then looked at Ethan with a plea in her eyes. "Ethan, tell them this isn't true." Ethan glanced briefly at the documents, then said calmly, "These emails are indeed communications between us, but the language has been exaggerated. I never authorized anyone to pay Matthew. That was entirely the action of Eleanor's company." Eleanor couldn't believe what she was hearing. Ethan was distancing himself from her, shifting all the responsibility onto her. "Ethan," she said in disbelief, "this was our joint plan. You can't do this." Ethan replied coldly, "I was unaware that your company's finances had such serious problems. This is your personal conduct. It has nothing to do with my company." Everyone in the room could see it was a clumsy lie, but Ethan had decided to sacrifice Eleanor to save himself, even if it meant betraying their love and joint venture. In that moment, Eleanor truly understood how cold and ruthless that elite world she aspired to was. Those values she considered progress and modernization were nothing more than blatant selfishness and utilitarianism. She didn't cry. She just sat down, her gaze empty, having lost all her strength. Jack continued, "Ladies and gentlemen, now we can begin the real negotiation. However, I first want to address an internal matter." He turned to Matthew. "According to the union bylaws, any member who accepts bribes and damages the interests of the union will be immediately expelled. Matthew, do you have anything to say?" Matthew stood up trembling. "I admit my mistake. I was blinded by money and betrayed the union and my brothers. I am willing to bear all the consequences." Jack nodded. "Your union membership is hereby terminated. All illegal gains will be recovered and used for the union's welfare fund. You may leave." Matthew, with his head bowed, quietly left the meeting room. Next, Jack looked at the representatives from New Era Manufacturing. "Now, about our negotiation. After attempting to divide the union and bribe our vice president, do you think there is still a basis for negotiation?" The company's chief legal counsel stood up. "Given the situation that has just been revealed, we need to suspend the negotiation and reassess our position." "Of course," Jack agreed. "But remember, the union is always open to sincere dialogue. We only oppose conspiracies and deceit. When you are ready for a real negotiation that respects the workers, you will be welcome at any time." The meeting ended early, and people began to file out. Eleanor remained sitting motionless in her seat as if frozen. Ethan, on his way out, stopped in front of Jack. "You've won this round, but business is a long game. Unions will eventually be eliminated by history." Jack didn't reply immediately. He organized the documents in front of him unhurriedly. Finally, he looked up and met Ethan's eyes directly. "You're wrong. The union is not an obsolete organization, but the guardian of a worker's dignity. Your failure today is not because you are on the right side of history, but because you underestimated the value of loyalty." Ethan let out a contemptuous laugh and walked away. After the meeting room door closed, only Jack and Eleanor were left. "So now what?" Eleanor finally spoke, her voice hoarse. "Now," Jack said quietly, "I'm going home to pack my bags, then I'll contact a lawyer to start the divorce proceedings." "Jack?" Eleanor's voice trembled. "I can explain." "No need to explain," Jack interrupted her. "Everything is very clear. You chose one path, I chose another. Our marriage ends here." He stood up, picked up his briefcase, and walked to the door. Before leaving, he turned to look at Eleanor one last time. "I just want to know one thing, Eleanor. That day when you sent me that text, what made you think I wouldn't notice?" Eleanor lowered her head. "Arrogance, I suppose. Success went to my head. I thought I was smarter than you, that I saw further. I forgot who gave me my first chance, who always supported my career." Jack nodded, saying nothing more. He opened the door and walked out of the meeting room, leaving Eleanor alone to face her ruined life. He stepped out of the building, taking a deep breath of the Pittsburgh air. Although he still felt pain inside, he experienced a strange sense of release. The lies had been exposed, the betrayal settled. Now it was time to start a new life. After the storm in the meeting room, the ripples began to spread through Pittsburgh's business and union circles. Jack returned to the union headquarters and immediately called a meeting of core members. He hid nothing, clearly explaining the entire matter from beginning to end. "What we faced was not just a negotiation," he told the union members, "but a conspiracy to destroy our unity. Unfortunately, in this conspiracy, there was a personal element of mine." His old friend Thomas clapped him on the shoulder. "Jack, no one blames you. You did the right thing." "Yeah," Ben added, "what surprised us was Matthew's betrayal." Jack thanked everyone for their support and then proposed a reform plan. "This incident has made me realize that we need a stricter financial oversight mechanism. I propose establishing an independent family entrepreneurship support fund, but with more rigorous third-party supervision. This is not aimed at anyone, but to ensure that union resources are used to truly support workers and their families." The proposal was unanimously approved. The union members had deep trust in Jack's leadership style and integrity, and this incident, far from weakening his authority, had raised it to unprecedented levels. After the meeting, Jack sat alone in his office. The events of the past 24 hours played like a movie in his mind. He took out his phone and looked at the 68 missed calls Eleanor had made yesterday, from initial anger to final desperation. He didn't open any voicemails. Instead, he deleted all the records and then blocked Eleanor's contact. This marriage was over. Jack contacted a lawyer and initiated divorce proceedings. The conditions he proposed were simple and clear. He didn't want any division of assets, only demanding that Eleanor pay the full union loan and get out of his life forever. At the same time, he moved out of the house he shared with Eleanor and rented an apartment near the union headquarters. Simple furniture, empty rooms, but for Jack, this was a release. Here there were no memories, no traces of betrayal, only the beginning of a new life. In the following weeks, events unfolded rapidly. Eleanor's company filed for bankruptcy protection after being unable to repay the $15 million loan. The union's credit union additionally sued her for alleged commercial fraud and misappropriation of funds, demanding compensation for additional damages. Her business reputation in Pittsburgh completely collapsed, and the clients who had once eagerly sought her out were now terminating their contracts. Meanwhile, the document revealing Ethan's conspiracy was anonymously leaked to the media. The Pittsburgh Business Chronicle dedicated a full page to reporting on this modern business conspiracy, describing Ethan as a typical executive who tried to destroy a union through conspiracies, but was counterattacked by his own stupid actions. The board of directors of New Era Manufacturing reacted quickly, firing Ethan for serious ethical and decision-making errors. For someone who valued his professional career above all else, this was a fatal blow. Matthew was expelled from the union for betraying his brothers and was required to return all illegal gains. He was completely isolated in the Pittsburgh working-class community and was eventually forced to leave the city. For Jack, work became a temporary refuge from personal pain. He devoted himself entirely to union affairs, attending more meetings, visiting more factories, listening to the problems and needs of the workers. This busyness allowed him to temporarily forget the breakdown of his marriage and the pain of betrayal. But at night, when he lay alone in the bed of his new apartment, that feeling of emptiness still came. It wasn't longing for Eleanor, but nostalgia for the genuine feeling he thought existed. "I know every trap in labor negotiations," he told Thomas one day, "but I couldn't see through my own marriage." Thomas shook his head. "It's not your fault, Jack. Some people are experts at faking it until they get what they want." Jack smiled slightly, not saying much more. He knew the pain would gradually fade with time, and he had to look forward. Outside of work, Jack began to rebuild his personal life. He took up his youthful hobby, restoring old Harley motorcycles. In the garage, the smell of oil and metal made him feel more at ease than in any meeting room. He also started going fishing regularly at a lake on the outskirts, not to catch much, but for the time alone. There, he could temporarily let go of the burden of being the union president and just be himself. Sometimes, when night fell and the lake reflected the stars, Jack would reflect on everything that had happened. He didn't regret his decision, but that sense of loss was still there like a shadow. It wasn't longing for Eleanor, but nostalgia for the genuine feeling he thought existed. One night, his old friend Samuel came to visit, bringing a good bottle of wine. "I heard you've been fishing alone," Samuel said. "You know, sometimes sharing is the real cure." Jack smiled slightly. "I'm not ready yet." "I understand," Samuel nodded. "But don't let her betrayal change you, Jack. Don't let anger and pain dominate your life." Jack looked at the Pittsburgh skyline through the window. "I'm not angry, Samuel. I'm just rediscovering myself. Who am I in a life without Eleanor? That takes time." Samuel raised his glass. "To time, to new beginnings." Jack clinked his glass with him. "To new beginnings." Eleanor's world collapsed at an astonishing speed. In the bankruptcy hearing, the judge severely questioned her company's financial operations, especially those 2 fund transfers to Matthew, which were considered commercial bribes. Although she argued they were just normal consulting fees, no one believed her. "Ms. Vance," the judge said sternly, "the evidence indicates that these fund transfers were to influence the internal decisions of the union, which has already exceeded the scope of normal business behavior. Legal fees and debts grew like a snowball, and Eleanor was forced to sell her luxurious apartment and expensive jewelry to cope. The once bright and glamorous life was now just ruins. What made her despair more was that those business executives who had once treated her with respect now avoided her. No reputable company wanted to hire this woman who betrayed her husband and manipulated the union. In her desperation, she thought of Ethan. Although he had betrayed her in the negotiation room, she still held out a hope. Perhaps it was just an emergency measure in that situation. Perhaps privately, he still cared about her. She dialed Ethan's number, and surprisingly, he answered. "Ethan," Eleanor's voice was full of pleading, "I need your help. I've lost everything." There was a silence on the other end of the phone. Then Ethan's cold voice. "Eleanor, you should understand that our relationship is over. After those emails went public, my reputation has already suffered serious damage. I can't have any more contact with you." "But you said we would create a future together," Eleanor almost cried. "You said I was the partner you needed." "That was a business strategy, Eleanor," Ethan said cruelly. "I needed your inside information and contacts. But now, you no longer have any value. In fact, I'm trying to prove to the board that I was manipulated by you. It's the only way to save my career." The call was cut off, and Eleanor collapsed on the floor. She finally understood that Ethan had never really loved her. She was just a piece on his chessboard. Once her use value was lost, she would be mercilessly discarded. At that moment, she began to truly reflect on her actions, not because of the consequences, but because she finally saw the vanity and greed in her heart. She had betrayed the only person who truly loved her, for an illusory elitist dream, for a world that had never really accepted her. In the deep night, Eleanor walked alone through the streets of Pittsburgh. The once familiar skyscrapers now seemed so cold and distant. She stopped in front of a small restaurant, a place she used to go with Jack when they were dating. Through the window, she saw the people inside chatting animatedly, warm and authentic. She remembered when Jack first brought her here. It wasn't to show off, but because the food was simple and delicious, because the people here were sincere and frank. "This is real life," Jack said then, "not those fancy dinners and empty social events, but a place where you feel at home." Eleanor didn't fully understand then. But now, after losing everything, she finally understood the truth in Jack's words. Returning to the small apartment she had temporarily rented, Eleanor sat in the dark, for the first time truly facing her failure and mistakes. She no longer tried to justify her actions nor blame others. She began to accept a cruel fact. Her ambition and vanity had destroyed her marriage and also her career. What hurt her most was not the material loss, but her betrayal of Jack. When she remembered the time they had spent together, his unconditional support and trust in her, she felt an unprecedented shame. She tried to contact Jack, wanting to apologize, but all calls went to voicemail. All messages went unanswered. She knew that there are wounds that cannot be repaired with a simple apology. Finally, Eleanor decided to take a job teaching basic business courses at a suburban community college. The salary was modest. The students were mostly children from working-class families, precisely the kind of people she had once looked down on. The first day of class, when she stood in the austere classroom looking at those young faces eager to change their destiny through education, she felt an unprecedented humility. "Today, I want to discuss with you the importance of business ethics," she began her first class, "because no matter how clever a strategy is, if it is based on deception and betrayal, it will eventually fail." The students listened attentively, not knowing that this professor's words came from painful personal experience. For Eleanor, this teaching job was not just a way to make a living, but also a redemption. She didn't expect Jack's forgiveness, nor to return to the top of the business world. She just hoped that through her teaching, she could prevent young people from making her same mistakes. This was not a story of dramatic redemption, no touching reconciliation, no tears of forgiveness, just a woman who was once blinded by ambition and vanity, starting a more authentic and quiet life after losing everything. As time passed, Jack's life gradually found a new rhythm. The divorce proceedings were surprisingly smooth. Eleanor did not contest any division of assets. She seemed to want to end this relationship as quickly as possible. The work at the union was still intense, but Jack learned to balance it better. He no longer accepted meaningless engagements, dedicating more time to truly important things, improving workers' conditions, fighting for better benefits for older workers about to retire, helping young workers learn new skills. His leadership style also underwent a subtle change. The old Jack was a tough negotiator. Now he was more receptive and understanding. "Experiences change a person," he said in a training session for union leaders. "But the important thing is that they make you better, not more bitter." 3 months later, on a Friday afternoon, Jack sat alone in a small bar on the banks of the Monongahela River. This was a place he frequented in his youth, far from the hustle and bustle of downtown, only with blue-collar workers and local residents. "Whiskey on the rocks again?" asked the bartender Dave, who had known Jack for over 20 years. "Yeah, the usual," Jack replied with a smile. Dave put down the glass and hesitated for a moment. "I heard about you and Eleanor. It's a shame." Jack gently swirled his glass. "That's life, Dave. Some paths seem parallel, but they're actually moving further and further apart. And how are you now?" "Alive." Jack took a sip of his drink. "Sometimes I feel very tired, but most of the time I'm okay." Dave nodded, not asking any more. This was the tacit understanding of the working-class world, respect for each other's privacy without prying too much. Jack finished his drink and left the bar. The night was deep. The Pittsburgh skyline glittered in the distance. He didn't go straight home but walked along the riverbank. During this time, he often reflected on the nature of love and trust. He had loved Eleanor sincerely. He was proud of her career, supported her every decision. But looking back now, perhaps from the beginning, they were people from different worlds. Eleanor longed for the recognition of elite circles, while Jack always maintained loyalty to his working brothers. It wasn't a matter of who was right or wrong, but a fundamental difference in values. But betrayal is betrayal. Regardless of how many reasons there were, the moment Eleanor chose to betray, she had already lost his trust and respect. Jack stopped and looked at the dark waters of the river. He didn't hate Eleanor, nor Ethan. Hate requires emotional investment, and he no longer wanted to spend any emotion on them. He took out his phone and deleted the last photo with Eleanor from his phone's album. Then he continued walking, his steps steady. A week later, at a fundraising event for a colleague who died in a work accident, Jack met the worker's sister, Lucy, a simple and strong elementary school teacher. "Thank you for everything you've done for my brother and his family," Lucy told Jack after the event. "The union has been like a second home to them." Jack nodded humbly. "It's what we have to do. Every worker is family." Lucy's frankness and warmth made Jack feel a lightness he hadn't experienced in a long time. She didn't have Eleanor's aggressive ambition, nor that superficial brilliance. She was a person who quietly dedicated herself in an ordinary position, just like Jack, believing that true value lies in helping and caring for others. "You're a good person, Jack Miller," Lucy said sincerely as they parted. "This city needs more people like you." This simple sentence caused ripples in Jack's heart, not because of the praise, but because of the feeling of being truly understood. After that, they would occasionally meet at community events, and gradually they began to have coffee together, talking about their respective jobs and lives. There was no tumultuous love, just a quiet and genuine companionship. Jack wasn't sure if this would develop into a new relationship, but at least he was beginning to believe again in the kindness and sincerity between people. His life was beginning to have a new direction, not forgetting the past, but learning from it, not forgiving the betrayal, but not letting the betrayal define his future. Time passed, and 8 months later, Pittsburgh had already seen many changes. Jack was still the president of the Steelworkers Union, but his work style and philosophy had evolved. Under his impetus, the union not only maintained the traditional spirit of solidarity, but also actively embraced the changes of the new era. He created a retraining fund for workers, helping older workers learn new technologies, collaborated with tech companies to provide programming courses for workers' children, and even promoted the union's internal digital transformation, making its operations more transparent and efficient. "The union is not a force that hinders progress," Jack said in a speech at a national union convention, "but the guarantee that progress benefits everyone." This speech was reported by several media outlets, and even Forbes magazine published a special article titled "The Modern Transformation of the Steelworkers Union, the Perfect Fusion of Traditional Values and the New Era." Ironically, Eleanor once dreamed of appearing on the cover of Forbes, and now Jack's ideas were recognized by this magazine. Lucy was sitting in the audience, applauding Jack's speech. In the past few months, their relationship had stabilized, moving from friends to partners. It was a quiet and warm relationship, with no bursts of passion, no dramatic conflicts, just mutual understanding and support. Lucy understood the importance of Jack's work and also respected that wound deep in his heart that could never completely heal. After the speech, a young reporter stopped Jack. "Mr. Miller, did you know that your ex-wife Eleanor now teaches at a community college in Indiana?" Jack's expression showed no change. "I wish her all the best. It is said that she recently published a book on the importance of business ethics. It seems this book is based on her own experience." "Excuse me," Jack politely interrupted the reporter. "I have an upcoming meeting I must attend." He didn't mention Eleanor, nor express any opinion on her new life. For Jack, that marriage was already a part of the past. It wasn't worth dedicating more time to. He walked out of the venue. Lucy took his arm. "Are you okay?" Jack nodded with a smile. "Very well. The past is in the past." He really did feel well. not because he had forgotten the pain, but because he had learned to coexist peacefully with it. The pain of betrayal would never completely disappear, but it was no longer the center of his life. Meanwhile, Eleanor's life had also taken a completely different turn. In her days as a professor at the community college, she gradually found an unexpected kind of satisfaction. Seeing the students' smiles when they understood a concept, listening to them share their dreams and struggles, Eleanor began to reevaluate what true success was. She was no longer that ambitious seeker of fame and fortune, but a professor trying to educate young people with her experience. Her courses were not just about business strategies, but about the importance of integrity, responsibility, and values. One day, a student asked her after class, "Professor, why did you leave your high-paying job as a business consultant to come teach here?" Eleanor reflected for a moment, then answered honestly, "Because I made a big mistake in the business world. I defined success as status and wealth, ignoring what's truly important, integrity and interpersonal relationships. Now, I hope that through teaching you won't repeat my mistakes." The student nodded, seeming to understand the deep meaning of her words. Later, Eleanor wrote her experiences and reflections in a book titled The Price of Betrayal: An Insider's Look at Business Ethics. This book didn't specifically mention the names of Jack or Ethan, but with an honest and self-reflective attitude, it narrated how she was blinded by ambition and vanity, ultimately losing everything. In the book, she wrote, "True success is not climbing the social ladder, but maintaining honesty and dignity at every step. When I lost everything, I understood what is truly valuable." This book attracted some attention in business ethics courses, and although sales were not high, it influenced some young business students. Eleanor didn't try to contact Jack, nor did she seek forgiveness. She knew that there are wounds that cannot be repaired, and trusts that once broken can never be fully restored. She chose to silently bear the consequences of her choices and seek meaning in her new life. As for Ethan, his fate was even more ironic. After being fired by New Era Manufacturing, he found that he had been completely marginalized in the Chicago business circle. No large company was willing to risk hiring this disloyal executive. After several failed job search attempts, Ethan finally accepted reality. He used some family savings to open a small factory in the suburbs, specializing in the production of simple metal parts. Surprisingly, his main clients were union-controlled factories. Those unions he once wanted to destroy were now his source of livelihood. More ironically, Ethan had to deal with the unions, respect their rules and requirements. Every time union representatives came to inspect his factory's conditions, he had to receive them with respect, fearful of losing these valuable orders. On one occasion, his factory received a large order that required temporarily increasing staff. For cost considerations, he wanted to bypass union regulations and directly hire non-union workers. But just as he was about to do so, the veteran workers in the factory warned him, "Boss, this violates the terms of the contract. If the union finds out, we'll lose all the orders." Ethan had to abandon the plan and obediently follow the union regulations. The former executive could now only survive cautiously in a small factory. Sometimes, fate arranges things so ingeniously, making the betrayer have to live in the world they once despised, obeying the rules they once wanted to destroy. More than a year had passed, and autumn had returned to Pittsburgh. The relationship between Jack and Lucy had already stabilized. They planned to get married the following spring. It was a quiet and warm relationship, with no bursts of passion, no dramatic conflicts, just mutual understanding and support. Lucy understood the importance of Jack's work and also respected that wound deep in his heart that could never completely heal. One day, Jack happened to run into Eleanor at the supermarket. She seemed to have aged a lot. The confident brilliance of before had completely disappeared, but her gaze was calmer, more authentic. They looked at each other, and for an instant, it seemed like they were back in the past. Eleanor opened her mouth as if wanting to say something, but finally just nodded slightly and walked away, pushing her shopping cart. Jack watched her retreating figure, not following or calling out. Some broken things can never be repaired. Some betrayals can never be forgiven. He turned and walked to the parking lot where his restored old Harley motorcycle was parked. He put on his helmet, started the engine, and rode into the streets of Pittsburgh. Upon returning home, Lucy noticed his mood seemed somewhat down. "Did something happen?" she asked gently. Jack hesitated for a moment, then said honestly, "I ran into Eleanor at the supermarket today." Lucy showed no jealousy or unease, just asked quietly, "Are you okay?" "I don't know," Jack confessed. "Seeing her made me remember a lot of things. Not because I still love her, but because the pain of that betrayal is still there." Lucy walked over to him and gently took his hand. "Some wounds take a long time to heal. Some even never completely disappear. It's okay, Jack. It's part of your experience. It's also part of what has shaped you." Jack looked gratefully at Lucy. "Thank you for understanding." Lucy smiled and said, "This isn't understanding, it's acceptance. Accepting all of you, including those scars." In that moment, Jack felt a deep gratitude, not because Lucy was trying to heal his wounds, but because she was willing to accept those wounds as part of him. In their relationship, Eleanor's betrayal was not a taboo subject, nor an obstacle to overcome. It was simply a fact in Jack's life, an experience, a lesson. One weekend, they went for a vacation to a small town on the shores of Lake Erie. Sitting on a bench by the lake, Lucy asked, "Do you still think about her?" Jack reflected for a moment, then answered honestly, "Sometimes. Not because I still love her, but because that experience changed me." "What changed you?" "It made me understand that there are wounds that can't heal, trusts that once broken can never be fully repaired." Jack looked at the calm surface of the lake. "But it also made me understand what's really important." Lucy took his hand. "What is it?" "Honesty, loyalty, and living according to your values," Jack smiled, "and finding someone who truly understands you." Lucy leaned on his shoulder, and together they watched the sun set on the lake, dyeing the sky a golden red. In this quiet moment, Jack knew he had found his inner balance. Not forgetting the past pain, but learning to coexist with it. Not forgiving the betrayal, but choosing a new beginning. He was no longer that person shattered by betrayal, but a stronger, wiser person. The shadow of betrayal would never completely disappear, but it no longer dominated his life. And in a small town in Indiana, Eleanor continued her teaching work. Occasionally, when she saw news about Jack and the union's achievements, she felt a mix of complex emotions. It wasn't jealousy, but a mixture of remorse and admiration. She knew she could never make up for the harm done to Jack, nor regain his trust, but she had accepted this reality and was trying to find meaning and value in her new life. This is the truth about betrayal. It not only hurts the betrayed, but also forever changes the betrayer. At any moment, choosing to betray means accepting a destiny from which one can never turn back. On the day Jack marked 15 years of working at the union, he decided to take a step back, ceding the position of president to the younger generation. "It's time," he announced at the union assembly. "The union needs fresh blood and new ideas. I've taught you everything I know. Now it's time for you to create your own history." He didn't retire completely, but took on the role of an advisor, offering advice and support in key negotiations. This gave him more free time, and he and Lucy moved to a small town on the shores of Lake Erie, leading a quiet life. Their wedding was simple and warm, only inviting the closest friends and family. There was no luxurious ostentation, no gathering of business elites, just sincere blessings and laughter. Jack rediscovered his youthful hobbies: fishing, repairing motorcycles, reading. He even started writing, recording his experiences and reflections over decades in the union. "This is not an autobiography," he told Lucy, "but a record about the power of loyalty, dignity, and solidarity." Lucy smiled and said, "These are the values you've championed your whole life, Jack." One weekend, Jack drove back to Pittsburgh alone to attend the funeral of an old union colleague. After the funeral, he decided to visit the union headquarters to see the young people's work. When he entered the building, in the lobby hung a large photo wall with the portraits of the union presidents throughout history. Jack's photo was in the most prominent place, with a plaque below that read, "Jack Miller, protector of the steelworkers, embodiment of loyalty and dignity." The young union members, upon seeing him, came over to greet him. Someone told him that the union had just successfully negotiated a new contract, securing better health insurance and pensions for the workers. "This is thanks to the foundation you laid," a young negotiation representative said. "You taught us to never betray our principles, no matter how great the temptation." Jack nodded, not saying much. He knew his story had already become part of the union. His lessons had already been remembered by later generations. After leaving the union headquarters, Jack decided to walk along the riverbank. When he reached a small bridge, he saw a familiar figure in the distance. Eleanor was sitting alone on a bench by the river. Jack hesitated for a moment, thought about turning around and leaving, but finally walked over. "It's been a long time," he said quietly. Eleanor looked up, surprise in her eyes, then complex emotions. "Jack, I heard you're teaching, and you've published a book." Eleanor nodded. "Yes, a book on business ethics. I want young people to know that success shouldn't come at the cost of morality." Jack didn't comment, just looked at the river. "Are you okay?" "Life goes on," Eleanor said softly. "Not as bright as before, but perhaps more authentic." She paused. "And you?" "I've taken a step back, living with Lucy on the shores of Lake Erie. Life is quiet, but full." Upon mentioning Lucy, Eleanor's gaze flickered for a moment, but she only said, "I'm happy for you, Jack. You deserve to be happy." They were both silent for a moment. Then Eleanor asked hesitantly, "Do you hate me?" Jack thought for a moment, then answered honestly, "I did hate you. But now, no, I don't hate you. That would require too much emotional investment, and I stopped wanting to spend energy on this a long time ago." Eleanor gave a bitter smile. "A fair answer." "I just want to know one thing," Jack said. "If you could go back, would you make different decisions?" Eleanor looked at the river, silent for a long time. Finally she said, "I would. Not because of the consequences, but because I now understand that true success is not climbing the social ladder, but keeping your soul intact." Jack nodded, saying nothing more. They stood in silence for another moment, then Jack looked at his watch. "I have to go. I have a long drive back." "Jack," Eleanor stopped him as he turned, tears shining in her eyes. "Thank you for talking to me today. I know I don't deserve forgiveness, but seeing you again, knowing you're okay, means a lot to me." Jack looked at her, seeing the vulnerability and sincerity of this once proud woman. He didn't say, "I forgive you," because there are wounds that can't be erased with simple words. Instead, he just said softly, "Take care, Eleanor." With that, he turned and walked away without looking back. He knew that no matter what Eleanor wanted to say, it wouldn't change anything that had already happened. Some betrayals, even if understood, are never forgotten. Jack returned to the parking lot and started his old restored Harley. The roar of the engine echoed in the empty lot, like memories of the past echoing in his mind. He put on his helmet and headed for the highway, towards Lake Erie, towards Lucy and their shared home, towards a new life. Behind him, the Pittsburgh skyline gradually faded, like that past filled with betrayal and pain, which would eventually become a chapter in his memory, not a constraint that determined his future. Jack knew he had won the most important victory, not revenge against Eleanor and Ethan, but his own redemption. He hadn't allowed betrayal to change his essence, hadn't let anger and resentment consume his soul. He was still that loyal and upright Jack Miller, protector of the steelworkers, the embodiment of loyalty and dignity. And this was more valuable than any revenge. Thank you for listening to this story full of emotional ups and downs. We'd love to know, from which part of the world are you watching this video? What time is it there? Let us know in the comments section, whether it's good morning, good afternoon, or good evening. We wish you a wonderful day. If this story resonated with you, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our channel for more fascinating content. We look forward to seeing you in our next story.